Unique people leading unique lives shape and inform Iowa City. This community is enhanced by these women and men who live in our midst, working, teaching, creating. Welcome to a series of conversations with people who have stories to tell. Join my guests and me, Ellen Buchanan, in a series of interviews called One of a Kind. Sandra and John Hudson retired in 1997, and after doing a national internet search on great places to retire, chose Iowa City to be their home. In 6 short years, they have become familiar faces supporting and attending arts and cultural events in Johnson County. They are true advocates and volunteers for the arts. Whether it's the first Englert Night Out, board member of the Iowa Arts Council, Arts Iowa City Street Level Gallery, the Cultural Sharing Network, the Johnson County Cultural Alliance, docents at the University Museum of Art, or the New Cultural Incubator. The Hudson's energy and expertise are vital parts of these organizations. Sandra was born in 1934 in Cedar Rapids, and John in Decatur, Illinois in 1930. Sandra attended Luther Academy and Junior College in Wahoo, Nebraska, and 20 years later received from Harvard a Master's of Education in Administration, Planning and Social Policy. John attended Reed College at the University of Oregon, receiving his master's degree in sociology from the University of Washington and his PhD in sociology from Cornell University. John was a teacher, researcher, and innovator, serving on the faculty at several universities, including Trent University in Canada, Syracuse University, Cornell University, and Harvard. He helped design the first multi-service health center for the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health. In the late 70s, John collaborated with Sandra to form Cambridge Condominium Collaborative, whose goal was to place human services within a condominium environment. Sandra taught childhood education in Oregon and Ontario and at the college level at Cornell, Bridgewater State College, and Boston University. She served as a corporate trainer for 3 years and directed children's programming for the Massachusetts Horticultural Society. It's hard to separate John and Sandra's stories as they are intertwined both personally and professionally. For years, they have as a team been proactive, taking knowledge to make things happen. And I found out in the research, they love to dance. The Hudsons have 2 sons, Scott and Brad. Welcome to One of a Kind. I want to tell you that this is rather unusual that I've had guests who have only been here 6 short years, but I thought it would be interesting for our viewers to hear from a couple who did a lot of research to find the perfect retirement town. Tell us about this.
Well, after living in Cambridge, Massachusetts for 24 years, we retired and we wanted to reproduce Cambridge in a small town setting with a lower cost of living. And for us, that meant it had to be a major university town, a freestanding small town, less than 100,000, world-class health care, intellectual atmosphere and cultural activities that the university brings. And after a nationwide search, Iowa City came to the top of the list.
Was it because a little bit you were familiar with this area of growing up in Cedar Rapids?
No, Ellen,
No.
it wasn't, no. We came at it, we listed our criteria, and we started our search. And in fact, when Iowa City came up, I said to John, the computer should have gone beep, beep. Because what happens is we all remember communities as we last saw them. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think to myself, it was a half a century ago that I last saw Iowa City. And so the result was that I really didn't believe that the things that the computer were telling me were in Iowa City were truly here. And in fact, it took us 3 trips for John to convince me. John's the researcher. He believes the data, but I had to see that. And when I realized that it did have the environment we were looking for, then it was very quick and easy, because my mother was still living at that time in Cedar Rapids, and I thought to myself, wow, this is much better than bringing her to me.
Sure.
We can just go to her. But it was the criteria of what Iowa City held, and what the citizens of Iowa City have done in the last 40 and 50 years is just absolutely remarkable.
Before I get into what your involvement in Iowa City has become, I know, John, I want to talk about your past a little. You grew up all over the United States. I read that your father was with the Department of Agriculture as an economist, and your mother was a musician. And your father was with Quaker Oats as a manager, and your mother worked for Killian's department store. And for many of us who've been around a while, we remember Killian's, which is no more. How did the two of you meet?
Well, we met in Portland, Oregon. I was teaching school, and John was home on holiday, Christmas holiday, from the University of Washington in Seattle. And we had a mutual friend. And the mutual friend brought us together on a blind date. And
The rest, they say, is history.
That's right.
And you two have worked together for many years as a team. Like I said in the introduction, you pride yourself really in taking information, knowledge, using it, and then making something happen. Talk about this part of your story, which I think is a very important part of your story.
Well, as a sociologist, I've been very much interested in creativity and innovation. Creativity is an individual activity, and innovation that happens at the organizational or community level. And over the years, we've tried to, the two of us have tried to apply some of these ideas to real-life situations to make various changes.
Well, give me some examples of what you've done in the past as a team.
Well, I tend to have the theories, and Sandra tends to be the one who does the implementation. And then we sort of work back and forth together as a team. Perhaps you can choose one of the examples.
Well, one of the first big ones was not here in Iowa City. One of the first big ones was in Canada, and it was back in the 70s. And education was going through a little bit of turmoil then. There were a large number of people who liked the open classrooms and a large number of people who liked traditional form of education. And John, being a theorist and also someone who's interested in creativity, felt there had to be a synthesis. Could we find a synthesis? And so we worked together and we created an experimental classroom.
Excuse me, what age?
Kindergarten.
Kindergarten, okay.
An experimental classroom for kindergarten.
Catch them early.
Catch them early.
Absolutely.
That's the idea. And I like to describe that as being a teacher-directed open classroom. It had a great deal of structure, but if you were to walk into the environment, you would have thought that it was an open classroom because there were so many activities going on simultaneously. But in fact, there was a very tight structure within the classroom. And this comes out of John's theories. His point was that for security, for feeling of well-being, children need to feel, everyone needs to feel confidence that the decisions they make and the actions they take, what the results will be. And so that does require an environment where we understand those things. So
Yeah, in fact, you can only be rational when you make decisions, when you can predict the likely outcome of your behavior, and that means a structured environment where there's some predictability. On the other hand, we didn't want a classroom with a lockstep method where every child had to do the same thing all the time. So we had multiple activity centers around the room, and so children could make choices about what they did, and they and each activity center had various levels of difficulty. So for the children, it was a kind of free-form activity, but from our point of view, we had built in the structure so that they could make choices and have predictable outcomes. And it was a very creative learning environment.
Aren't many schools doing that now?
Well, not in the
to
same
the
manner, but
degree.
yes, it has been happening. The reason it's not happening in the same manner, Ellen, is that it was very costly, both in terms of time and in terms of money. And our school systems don't have that. So it's not a case of we don't know how. It's that it's not reached a point where it's practical. But there are attempts at this, and I think things are happening the best they can with the resources that are available. And talk about one of the more recent things we've done where we've looked at the structure of an organization and trying to decide is right here in Iowa City, and that is the Johnson County Cultural Alliance. And a lot of John's thought and theory was created for that. And one of the things that the organization does because of that is it's very project oriented, so that everything has a beginning and an end, and you just move from project to project rather than the typical bureaucratic organization. So,
Well, I looked at your list of cultural volunteer items, and I'm thinking, when do you two sleep? You have gotten so involved in Iowa City. My goodness, there's the Englert, there's the Johnson County Cultural Alliance, the Arts Iowa City, the Cultural Incubator. Talk some more about what the involvement in these wonderful things for cultural activities.
Well, one of the earliest activities we got involved in was with the Englert Civic Theater, helping to raise money for the renovation of that theater. And Sandra came up with a concept for which we called Englert Night Out, and the name has stuck, and the activity seems to be continuing. It's an annual event. It occurs on New Year's Eve afternoon from 4 to 8
Perfect.
p.m.
That's a great idea.
So it's at a time when families can participate. It's an alcohol-free event, and it occurs downtown in Iowa City at about a dozen different venues around town where performers of all sorts, magicians, storytellers, musicians, and so forth, actors, perform every hour on the hour from 4 through 7 o'clock for about 40 minutes. And then there's time to change and go to the next venue. And we helped organize that. We helped raise the money for the first such Englert Night Out. And it's now
going to be a tradition?
Well,
it's going to be, they're hoping?
It looks like.
And then maybe move into the theater itself,
well,
perhaps down the road?
The theater would be one venue.
One venue.
But the idea is to have multiple venues around the city so that various, not only performers, but organizations who own the performance spaces, churches, stores, the library, for instance, can also participate by using their spaces for the event. Perhaps you want to add something to that.
well, it's just a wonderful time for members of the community to gift to the community. And what I mean by that is many cultural organizations and performance groups receive funding from government sources, from foundations and so on. They're on the recipient end of receiving gifts. And this is an opportunity for them to give a gift back to the community. And we just think that redefining what New Year's Eve is to bring it into being a family event and non-alcoholic and in the afternoon, you don't have to wait until midnight.
Right.
It's just kind of a fun thing to do. And at the same time, it gives visibility to the Englert and helps raise a little bit of money. So that was the fun thing.
Well, when you came here, you first came here, how did you find out? Did you go to the library and research all these different venues, or did you have somebody said you should look at this, to do this? What happened?
Well, we had the good fortune
Yes.
of the very first weekend in town meeting the Strayers. Okay. and Faye is a wonderful, wonderful interviewer. And she just sat down and tried to find out from us what the things were that we were interested in. And she took us under her wing. And she would take us to the organizations that she thought would be of interest to us. Even if she was not a member of that organization, she would find someone within that organization and make sure that we got there. She was on our doorstep to pick us up and to deliver us
What an
places.
ambassador.
Yes, she was. And this is not just for us. We've watched Faye, and she does this over and over again. And of course, Gordon, having been the public relations person for the university for so many years, he knows both the university and the community. And so when they took what we were interested in and sat down, they were able to really make some nice connections. So
That was the beginning.
that was the beginning.
Way to go,
They got us
Strayers.
started.
They got you started. How did the cultural corridor start? Did you get involved in that too? Did you not? Tell us about this.
Well, we, after being here several years and being involved in so many volunteer activities with cultural organizations, we began to sense the need for a cultural alliance that would bring the various arts and cultural organizations together in some kind of network for mutual support, learning, greater visibility in the community, collaborative programming and fundraising and so forth. And we had heard that there had been cultural alliances started in the past also. And so we thought we would try this again. And at the same time we were thinking this, we met Joshua Schamberger, who was the newly appointed executive director of the Iowa City Coralville Convention and Visitors Bureau. And he told us he was thinking of starting a cultural alliance here in Johnson County. And so we, the three of us got together and working with other people from the arts and cultural community, the Johnson County Cultural Alliance has come into being.
And the Cultural Corridor was one of the projects that came out of that. One of the things we wanted was a website. Websites are exceedingly expensive, the kind that we were thinking of. Culturalcorridor.org is very valuable to our community. And by joining with the Greater Cedar Rapids Cultural Alliance, we were able to have the resources to build this fantastic website that lists all the cultural events that are happening.
I went on it and saw it. Well, who's funding it? You said Cedar Rapids, but where did the funds come from for the website?
Cultural Alliance
Raises money?
went out, and we each assessed ourselves $100, and then we, Alliant Energy, put in $3, and various other $3,000, sorry.
Yes, I was going to say yes.
And various other organizations put in $1,000 or whatever, and that's how we raised the money. And it is self-sustaining. Each organization maintains its own
Web page.
information, their own web page. And so it's always accurate and always right up to date. I mean, if you're wondering on a snowy night whether you should go out, just get on culturalcorridor.org, and if it's been canceled, it'll say so.
That's a good thing to know.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Well, I know besides your volunteer work, you are in the audiences at CLAP, at Hancher, at the Des Moines Opera, the Cedar Rapids Opera.
Yes.
Is this from this love of classical music and come from your mother who was a musician, or?
I think I originally must have learned my love of classical music from my mother. She had been a music major in college, and she played the piano all through my childhood and continued playing, in fact, until she died. I remember listening to the Metropolitan Opera broadcast when I was a child, way back when.
Right.
And then I took music lessons, piano lessons, as a teenager, and I think my music teacher was a big influence also.
Yeah, let's talk about your influences, both of you. Who, looking back in your brief life, I will say that, who or what has had an influence on you besides this music teacher?
Right, my mother, for my childhood, several teachers, in addition to my piano teacher. I had a high school physics teacher who was quite influential.
Because in what way?
I think it was the way he taught, his personality, his high expectations. He expected you to turn in papers on time. I remember staying up all night the night before a paper was due, and I turned it in. It was late, and he immediately dropped it in the waste paper basket. That made a big impression on me. And yet he was a very warm human being. One of the best teachers I ever had in high school. My physics teacher in college. I think it was just a coincidence it was physics, but again, it's the personality, the teaching style, the connection a teacher makes with a student. And when I became a teacher, I tried to emulate that. When I was in graduate school, another teacher, Marty Martell, a sociologist, who later became a close friend. In fact, he was on the faculty here at University of Iowa at one time. But I first met him at the University of Washington as a graduate student. So those would be, and then of course later in life, once I was married, the major influence in my life became my wife, Sandra.
Nice. How lovely. And I like, what I read in your research, John, was that you were given 3 awards at 3 different times by your students, and I think that's must mean a lot to you to get those
It does
awards.
mean a lot. It meant a lot at the time, and it still does. I'm very proud of those teaching awards because they came from the students in the class in which I was teaching. One at Lehigh University and 2 different classes in 2 different years at Trent University in Canada.
What about you? Who or what has made a difference in your life?
Well, my father, he was a very charismatic person, and I was an only child, and so he did take some interest in kind of helping me to understand things that were important and shaping the way I looked at things and how I did things. And so I feel that I received 3 really important things from him. And one was that if an opportunity doesn't exist, you have a responsibility to try and create it. That was very important.
Good advice.
Yeah. And another thing that he taught me was to never, ever say no to myself, that there were enough people in the world who would say no to me. And so if there was something I was interested in, I should go forward and try and do it and wait for someone else to tell me no.
That's good.
And
That's good.
then the final thing was to play with the best. That you were to always play with the best, because even though you wouldn't be very good or not quite as good as the best were, you would certainly be better by trying to emulate what they were doing. And so those were the
Good
3
advice.
big lessons that he taught me, and they've served me well throughout life. They have brought me many opportunities I wouldn't have had otherwise.
My goodness.
So-
Did he live a long life, or?
Yes, he did. He lived a fine life and a very interesting life, and remembered by many people. Yeah.
What wonderful pieces of a way to live.
It was.
A pattern of living. I read that you are 2 are grant writers, or one of you is a grant writer. Are you the grant writer?
both
are.
both
That
grant
and
writers.
organizations are using you, because that is a wonderful skill.
Right. Well, the fun part is to write a grant, you really have to know the organization. And so it's an opportunity to get in and find out more about the organization to be able to write an effective grant for them. And so that's the fun part
Are
of
you
it.
working on one now, a grant, or are you finished?
No, we have just finished a grant.
For whom?
The Cedar Rapids Opera. We just finished writing one for them, working on one for them. It's always a joint collaboration. You know, what we write has to be cleared through many processes. And so the end result we feel is theirs, but we tend to know the questions to ask the organization so that they start examining those parts of their organization and to strengthen things that need to be strengthened to make them in a position to be funded, I think. Would you say that was?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've read also that you are doing a feasibility study on a building that is one of my favorites on the campus. It's between the music school and the theater, and it's the old Canoe House.
Absolutely.
I know this is your future. I know you're always looking to the future. That's good. Tell us about this. This is, I'm very excited about this.
Well, when our son came to visit, our son who lives in Cambridge, came to visit, we were touring the campus, and he saw this little stone building on the banks of the Iowa River. And he said, that would be a great coffee house. So we sort of took that idea and ran with it and expanded it through talking with a number of people at the university. So the concept that we're pursuing now for that building is a coffee house and a small performance center. It'll be a place for students and faculty to meet, for the university and the community to come together, for students or faculty or community members to play impromptu performances, either solo guitar, piano, jazz, classical, combo groups. We just think it would be a terrific thing to be a focus there in the arts campus.
This is an example of those principles that we were talking about creating the opportunity. We wanted to do this. We had no idea how to work with the university, and then Sandy Boyd in his second presidency came out and said, you know, we need to be working out in the community. So we figured that since he was rolling out the red carpet for his faculty to walk out, we'd just jump on that same red carpet and walk in. And so we took this concept to Philip Jones. The Canoe House is under his administration, also student services and also food services. So they're all under his administration. And we asked, you know, can we create a business plan for this? Will you entertain this? And so he said absolutely, gave us the go-ahead to work on this, and that's what we're doing. And when we take it back to him, hopefully he will find it of merit. But as with any feasibility study, Ellen, you really have to know, as we have learned, sometimes downstream you'll run against something that is an obstacle that can't be overcome. And so far, we haven't run into that with the Canoe House, so we're hopeful.
There's nothing in there now, is it?
No.
Other than that sweet little fireplace. There's a fireplace in there.
Yes.
And what a view.
Yes.
What a view.
And a gorgeous building.
It is, isn't it?
Gorgeous building.
It
It's a
is.
1937 WPA building.
And the people over in the arts campus are really enthusiastically behind it. The people in the School of Music, Division of Performing Arts, theater, the foundation is enthusiastic about it. The university planner loves the idea. Everybody seems to think it's a great concept.
Well, good luck on this. To be continued, be continued.
Absolutely.
Yes.
How important has it been to be a docent at the museum? Has that been quite fun and a learning experience for both of you?
Absolutely.
Would you recommend it to
Absolutely.
people coming here and or been here for a while to get involved being a docent?
Absolutely. It's an excellent education program that's provided for you to be able to do that. We had an interest in art as being museum goers. We were not very knowledgeable concerning art. We were in that, when we came in that area where we knew what we liked. We may not have known why we liked
Yes, but you knew what you liked.
we knew
yes.
what we liked, right. And through education, we've learned to appreciate things that we hadn't appreciated before. And so it's an opportunity to volunteer and have great personal growth. It was for us, and it started a hobby for us, which is visiting the small arts towns of America. And that's what we do. And so we visit all the major museums going to and from these small art towns, and we are feeling that we're receiving great reward in our day-to-day lives from having been docents. So absolutely, if it's something that would, you know, if art has even a minor interest, you'd be surprised how much it can be developed by being a docent.
John, you mentioned your son. You have two sons, Scott and Brad.
Yes.
What? One of them you said is at Cambridge. What is he up to, and your other son is where?
Our older son is in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and he's working at the VA hospital there. Our younger son, Brad, is in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and he is at Boston University. He's been on the faculty there in the School of Hospitality Management, and he's now working as a fundraiser in their office of their university foundation.
And they get to Iowa City occasionally?
Yes.
Good. A couple years ago, in 2001, the Wall Street Journal had an article, quite a large one, I think it was a whole page article, about retirement towns. And you were called, and the Dudleys were called. And what were some of the questions they asked you and some of your responses? This was two years ago.
Oh my word, 2 years.
What did they? I mean, what was some of the specifics? I mean, besides good, health care and.
Well, he asked about the process of how we made that choice.
Like you mentioned, the internet and
That's
wanting
right.
certain size and.
What our criteria were and what the process was. And then some of the things that we were doing after we arrived here. And there were photographs taken by Mark Tade, a local photographer. And so that was what the article was essentially about.
And you did mention in the article I read in the research that that Iowa City has exceeded your expectations.
That is correct.
There were things that were not on the internet that we have discovered since we've gotten here. And we use a great deal, a great deal.
Like?
Well, for example,
Well, like our library, all right? The library may have been on the internet, but we were searching the university and didn't pick it up. And there are many great things about the library, including the ability to take original art
That's right.
and have it into your home for a while. So last month, for example, I love Shirley Wyrick's things and cannot afford them. But I had a Shirley Wyrick in my house for a goodly number of weeks, thanks
That's a
to
good
the
program.
local library. So that was one example. Another example is Clapp Auditorium,
Yes.
where we didn't know, and they have 2 and 3 free concerts a week. And those free concerts are marvelous, very talented people, and in a very intimate environment. So that was another thing that we found. And the writers, the summer writers workshop, right?
That's right, that anybody can sign up for a 5-day course or a weekend
you done
course.
that?
And
Oh,
we
yes.
have done that, that's right.
And your teachers are at the Summers Writers Workshop. Are they?
Jeffrey Sweet, I took for dialogue, and as a result of his course and a result of his book, we've started a memoir writers group, and it's now in its 3rd year.
So you're writing your stories.
We
We're
are.
writing stories.
We are
yes.
indeed.
But more fun is listening to other people's stories. That's the joy, and memories that, as we'd say, we don't tend to look in the back. So starting to write our memoirs was really difficult. But as we listen to other people's memoirs, they bring our memories to life. You know, they'll talk about something and then we'll remember that part of our life. And
That's right. And the writing ability of all of us in the group has improved over the 3 or 4 years that we've been meeting every other week.
That's wonderful. Well, I think we should end on that note because you are looking forward. You're continuing to say yes to all that Iowa City has to offer, plus giving back. So it's been a real pleasure to have the two of you on my show.
Thank you.
My guests on One of a Kind are Sandra and John Hudson, 2 enthusiastic advocates and energetic volunteers for the arts in Iowa City. Retiring from the East Coast to Iowa in 1997, they already have made a difference in our community. Not only taking advantage of the cultural offerings as audience members, they lend their support and expertise to enhance various arts organizations. In 2002, they received the Larry Eckelt Award for Art and Cultural Advocacy, and the following year, the Community Spirit recognition by the Iowa City Press Citizen. We look forward to the Hudson team continuing to make things happen in our community. Sandra Hudson, John Hudson, two of a kind.